Welcome back to my YouTube channel, where every coin has a hidden story and sometimes, just sometimes, a humble piece of metal turns into a legend worth a fortune. Today, we dive deep into one of the most astonishing tales ever uncovered in the world of rare coins, a story so extraordinary that it continues to baffle collectors, historians, and even treasure hunters alike. We are talking about the 1990p quarter dollar, a coin most people overlook. Yet this specific piece fetched a mind-bending $950 million at a private auction, making it one of the most valuable and mysterious coins in history. But how could something so ordinary become so unfathomably priceless? Sit back as we unravel a journey that spans continents, decades, and even involves lost treasure maps, secret societies, and a family legacy tangled in secrets no one ever expected to surface. It began in a small Pennsylvania town where a retired machinist named Joseph Albrecht lived a quiet and solitary life. Known for his modest demeanor and a passion for coin collecting that dated back to the 1950s, Joseph spent his days meticulously sorting, cataloging, and preserving coins he had gathered from circulation, estate sales, and occasional trades. Nothing about Joseph's collection stood out, at least not until his passing in 2021 when his niece, a schoolteacher named Rachel, inherited the unassuming wooden chest that had been locked away in his basement for nearly 40 years. She almost gave the coins away, thinking they were of little value, but something compelled her to keep them just a bit longer. Among the hundreds of coins, one quarter stood out. It wasn't gleaming or flashy. In fact, it bore the usual wear and tear one might expect from a circulated coin. But etched across the rim, barely visible under magnification, was a tiny set of numbers that didn't belong: 982731. Curious, Rachel took the coin to a local collector, who couldn't make sense of the digits but sensed something unique about the quarter's composition. It felt different, heavier, more refined in detail. He recommended she send it to a specialist, and that's when everything changed. Within weeks, the coin was in the hands of Dr. Felix Morano, a numismatic expert and metallurgist at the New York Numismatic Research Institute. As he began studying the piece, he realized that this was no ordinary 1990p quarter. While millions had been minted, this particular coin was made of a rare palladium alloy, not the typical copper-nickel clad used in US quarters. Even more bizarre, the microscopic code on the rim matched no known minting identifiers, production batch numbers, or die signatures. Dr. Morano suspected a one-off experiment, possibly a prototype or a mint error, but his deeper analysis revealed a more shocking truth. Embedded within the alloy were trace elements of iridium, one of the rarest metals on Earth, combined in a way that suggested intentional engineering rather than accident. Someone had gone to incredible lengths to craft a coin that would go unnoticed in circulation but held immense value in composition alone. And if that wasn't enough, a radiographic scan showed another anomaly: a microlattice layer hidden between the inner cores, housing a nanostructured circuit. A coin, somehow, had been embedded with data. Word of the discovery spread quickly in the numismatic community, but the implications went far beyond collectors. Government agencies, private investors, and tech corporations began expressing interest. Why would someone embed data in a quarter? What was the purpose of using such exotic metals? Who had the capacity to do it back in 1990? Digging deeper into the coin's origin led investigators to the Philadelphia Mint's production records from late 1989 and early 1990. Anomalies were detected in the documentation: missing logs, altered employee shifts, and one name that came up repeatedly: Elias Van Doren, a metallurgist who vanished mysteriously in early 1990. Van Doren was known for his unorthodox methods and had previously worked on classified government projects involving nanotechnology and materials science. Some believed he had grown paranoid and become obsessed with hiding information in plain sight. Old colleagues described him as a genius with a rebellious streak, someone who saw the potential for everyday objects to become vessels of deep secrets. A former intern recalled an offhand comment Van Doren once made about turning the smallest things into the greatest legacies. No one thought much of it at the time. Now, in light of the quarter, that comment took on new meaning. Meanwhile, Rachel found herself thrust into a whirlwind. The coin was secured under high security while experts decoded the data embedded within it. The results were nothing short of astonishing: encrypted files containing blueprints for a quantum processing module that had yet to be developed by any known research group. The data predated similar discoveries by over 2 decades, and the algorithms outlined were exponentially more advanced than current technology. Who had written this? How did it end up in a quarter? And why? A deeper dive into Van Doren's background uncovered an even stranger twist. He had been part of a secret think tank in the late 1980s, formed after a clandestine project within the Department of Energy went rogue. This group, operating under the code name Argent Signal, consisted of physicists, AI developers, and encryption specialists, many of whom died under mysterious circumstances in the following years. Van Doren, it appeared, had been the last to disappear. The leading theory? He encoded the most valuable elements of their research into a coin, relying on the chaos and anonymity of circulation to hide it from those who sought to destroy the knowledge. That theory gained even more traction when it was discovered that multiple parties had been trying to track down this coin for years. A Swiss banking firm with ties to ex-intelligence agents had a bounty on it since 2006. A reclusive tech billionaire named Edgar Strom was rumored to have been buying 1990p quarters in bulk, reportedly paying over $1 million for dozens of them in secret. The coin, it turned out, had its own following, a shadow world of collectors and seekers chasing what they called the key. Strom eventually surfaced, making an offer of $900 million for the coin. Rachel, now advised by a team of legal and historical experts, declined the first offer. But after months of negotiation, it was sold at a private auction in Monaco for $950 million. The buyer's identity remained confidential, but suspicions pointed to an international tech consortium with interests in artificial intelligence and secure communication technologies. Rachel used a portion of the funds to establish the Albrecht Institute for Public Knowledge, a non-profit devoted to exploring suppressed innovations, technological ethics, and historical mysteries. The rest of the money, she used to retire quietly in Maine, always watching her back, knowing that once you've uncovered something that was meant to remain buried, you become part of a bigger story, one you don't always get to control. But the story of the 1990p quarter didn't end there. Months after the auction, whispers of similar coins began to surface. A fisherman in Alaska found one in an old tackle box. A teenage girl in rural Texas discovered one in a collection her grandfather left her. Each new coin had its own unique code on the rim. Each contained a segment of encrypted data. Put together, they seemed to form a larger puzzle, one that no one has yet been able to fully decode. Treasure hunters, scholars, and rogue coders now call these the Van Doren series, and theories abound that dozens, maybe hundreds, of these coins still exist, scattered across the globe, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize their worth. Collectors now scour flea markets and pawn shops, analyzing every 1990p quarter they find. Some carry scanners and mini X-ray devices in their backpacks. Online forums are full of speculation, digital maps, and rumors of a secret fund established by Van Doren to reward those who complete the entire data set. Whether true or not, the frenzy has revitalized an entire subculture of numismatics, where each coin is more than money. It's a mystery, a mission, and maybe a message from someone who believed knowledge should never be buried forever. To this day, the US Mint has issued no formal comment on the coin. Van Doren's family denies knowing anything about his activities. And Rachel, now older and more reclusive, rarely speaks publicly. But in a rare interview she gave last year, she ended with a line that has since become legendary in coin-collecting circles: "It wasn't the quarter that made the difference. It was the story no one wanted to tell." And that, perhaps, is the true value behind the 1990p quarter dollar, not the iridium, not the quantum code, not even the $950 million price tag. but the reminder that in a world overflowing with noise and distraction, the smallest, quietest things often carry the loudest truths. Next, 1992 D $quarter coin, where hidden treasures are brought to light, and stories once buried under layers of time and mystery finally get their moment to shine. Today's journey leads us into the heart of one of the most spellbinding discoveries in the world of coin collecting, a seemingly average 1992 P $quarter that turned out to be anything but ordinary. What looked like just another coin from a pocketful of change stunned the world when it sold for a staggering $900 million, instantly becoming one of the most coveted and enigmatic artifacts in numismatic history. This is not just the story of a rare coin, it's a story of intrigue, hidden identities, lost technologies, and the astonishing realization that history often hides its greatest truths in plain sight. Get ready for a deep dive into the past, because the tale of the 1992 P $quarter is going to take you places you never imagined. Our story begins in the humid spring of 2003 in Savannah, Georgia, a city known more for its haunting beauty and southern charm than for coin collecting. A young man named Tyler Hammond, freshly out of college and working part-time as a barista while trying to fund his art projects, stumbled upon a small box of old coins at a garage sale. The woman hosting the sale, a widowed retiree named Lorraine, had placed a $5 sticker on the box, clearly unaware of what it contained. Tyler, always curious and on the lookout for materials to repurpose for his mixed media art, picked up the box, not knowing that a single coin inside would eventually change the course of his life and history. For months, the box of coins sat in Tyler's apartment gathering dust. It wasn't until a rainy afternoon that he decided to go through it, mostly out of boredom. Sorting through pennies, nickels, and dimes, he found a few wheat cents and a buffalo nickel that caught his eye, but nothing seemed truly extraordinary. That is, until he picked up a quarter dated 1992, minted in Philadelphia. It wasn't shinier than the rest, nor did it scream value, but it had a strange feel to it. He couldn't describe it, only that it felt heavier and colder, and the way it gleamed under light wasn't quite like the others. As fate would have it, Tyler's roommate, Derek, was an amateur collector. When he came home later that night, Tyler casually handed him the coin and asked what he thought. Derek examined it with a jeweler's loupe and immediately furrowed his brow. There was something odd about the rim, it seemed too perfect. The reading was unusually sharp, more so than any standard circulation coin should be. Moreover, the obverse design had subtle differences. Washington's bust was slightly more refined, the details more pronounced, and under the microscope, Derek noticed a faint set of letters hidden beneath the date, invisible to the naked eye. And they began researching and quickly learned that no such marking was associated with any known U.S. mint designation. Intrigued, they contacted a local coin shop owned by a former Treasury Department employee named Elaine DeVore. Elaine, skeptical at first, agreed to take a look. Within moments of examining the coin, her demeanor shifted from casual interest to intense curiosity. She knew this wasn't just a standard issue coin. Elaine made a few calls, and soon the coin was being examined by experts from the American Numismatic Association. Their initial findings were shocking. The coin was made not of the standard copper-nickel composition, but of a mysterious alloy that included trace amounts of rhodium, osmium, and an unidentifiable synthetic compound that didn't match any known minting material. Even more intriguing was the electromagnetic signature the coin emitted, extremely faint, yet distinct enough to be picked up by specialized equipment. It was emitting a pattern, a pulse, one that had a mathematical rhythm. As investigations intensified, a broader team of specialists got involved, including metallurgists, cryptographers, and even former members of DARPA who had turned to the private sector. What they discovered stunned them. Embedded deep within the coin's lead structure was a microchip, far smaller than anything commercially available at the time, and encased in a matrix that made it resistant to scanning or tampering. After several months of careful and meticulous analysis, they managed to access the chip's contents. Inside was a compressed trove of data that, when decrypted, revealed schematics for a type of propulsion system based on zero-point energy, a theory long considered fringe or purely theoretical. The implications were enormous. The designs and equations referenced principles of quantum field manipulation, gravity distortion, and energy efficiency ratios so high that it would render current fuel-based systems obsolete. Whoever encoded this information had knowledge that far surpassed even the most advanced laboratories in the world, but who? And more importantly, why in a quarter? The trail led back to the Philadelphia Mint, where the 1992 P coin originated. A thorough investigation of archival records revealed an unusual string of incidents in early 1992. Several employees had been reassigned, one engineer had gone missing, and production logs from a 10-day window in March were mysteriously lost in a fire that destroyed part of the Mint's sub-basement archive room. A name that kept resurfacing was Dr. Philip Sanderson Monroe, the same initials hidden on the coin. Dr. Monroe was a government contractor, physicist, and a quiet genius with a documented history of working on classified energy projects during the late 1980s. According to unsealed documents from a defunct military contractor known as Cyphertrek, Monroe had been developing experimental miniaturized data storage units capable of surviving extreme conditions. His last known project involved embedding high-level data into inconspicuous objects for long-term preservation. He vanished in late 1992. A former colleague, now living in exile in South America, told an investigative journalist that Monroe had grown disillusioned with how his research was being used. Fearing it would be weaponized or buried forever by governments and corporations, Monroe devised a backup plan. He encoded key portions of his work into the coin's microchip and minted a handful of prototypes, each one meant to hold a piece of the puzzle. He called it Project Sentinel. That revelation set off a frenzy. Coin collectors, scientists, government agents, and even treasure hunters began scouring the country for more 1992 P quarters that might belong to the Project Sentinel series. Reports of people using Geiger counters, magnetometers, and custom-built scanners to sift through coin rolls became common. Entire online communities sprang up, dedicated to decoding possible messages and tracking suspicious coins. But Tyler's quarter remained the only verified piece to have surfaced with such embedded technology. As interest in the coin ballooned, offers began to pour in. The Smithsonian Institution wanted to acquire it for preservation. A consortium of tech investors tried to buy it under the guise of scientific research. Several shadowy figures made anonymous bids, the highest of which finally reached an astonishing $900 million. After months of legal deliberation, security checks, and private negotiation, the coin was sold in a secretive transaction, its buyer concealed behind layers of offshore shell companies. Tyler and Derek quietly vanished from the public eye, their names erased from most public records, presumably enjoying new lives far from the spotlight, but the coin's legacy lived on. What started as a single, unassuming quarter sparked a global search for more. By 2010, at least 3 other coins with similar but distinct data chips were rumored to exist, one possibly in Japan, another in Berlin, and a third unconfirmed sighting in Cairo. Each coin allegedly held part of a broader technological manifesto designed to reshape humanity's relationship with energy and propulsion. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some claimed Monroe was still alive, guiding seekers from the shadows. Others believed Project Sentinel was only a cover for a much deeper truth involving extraterrestrial contact and suppressed knowledge dating back to ancient times. A best-selling book speculated that the coins were modeled after an ancient artifact found during a secret dig in the Nevada desert in 1954. Documentaries, podcasts, and even films tried to capture the mystery, but none could fully explain why a man would hide knowledge so advanced in such a fragile and fleeting medium, or whether would ever truly unlock all that it contained. The US government has never confirmed the coin's authenticity, nor has it denied it. A former Treasury official speaking under anonymity admitted only that certain anomalous items have passed through circulation in the past but would not elaborate further. Some believe that behind closed doors, intelligence agencies are working to reconstruct the data found in Tyler's coin, while others think the technology has already been reverse-engineered and quietly introduced into modern systems. One thing is certain: the 1992p quarter dollar is no longer just a coin. It's a symbol. A beacon for those who believe in the power of forgotten knowledge, the danger of centralized control, and the idea that sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. And as long as there are drawers of old change, dusty coin jars in attics, and forgotten collections in basements, the hunt continues. The world is full of secrets, and perhaps, just perhaps, another seemingly insignificant coin is out there, holding the key to yet another chapter in this unbelievable saga. Keep your eyes open. You never know what might be hiding in your pocket. Next, 1989p quarter dollar coin, where the ordinary turns extraordinary and forgotten treasures resurface with stories that defy belief. Today, we are diving into one of the most astounding tales in numismatic history, a story that starts with a seemingly ordinary 1989p quarter dollar and ends with a value so massive, it would leave even the most seasoned collectors breathless. This isn't just a story about metal and mint marks, it's about mystery, power, and an unexpected journey through time, conspiracy, and the hidden economics of the world's most elite collectors. Settle in, because what you're about to hear isn't just rare, it's nearly unbelievable. Let's get into the legend of the 1989p quarter dollar that's now worth $989 million. It all began on a rainy evening in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. David Latimer, a former U.S. Mint technician long retired, was rummaging through an old wooden chest left behind by his late grandfather, who had worked at the Philadelphia Mint in the late 1980s. David hadn't opened the chest in years, and for good reason. It was filled with yellowing paperwork, dusty tools, and keepsakes from a life dedicated to coin production. But tucked under a stack of minting diagrams and early prototypes was a single coin wrapped in faded silk cloth, a 1989p quarter. At first glance, the quarter appeared unremarkable. It bore the traditional image of George Washington on the obverse, the P mint mark just beneath the bust, and the standard eagle reverse. It wasn't until David tilted the coin under the dim light of the attic that he noticed something strange. The edge had an unusual shimmer, not like the typical copper-nickel clad. It was heavier, denser. And it wasn't just the weight, it was the feel of it, the resonance when tapped lightly on the wooden table. This coin had a soul of its own. David, a curious man by nature, decided to take the coin to a friend who worked at the Numismatic Research Institute in Chicago. There, under a barrage of tests and high-tech scans, the truth began to unravel. The composition was unlike any quarter ever produced by the U.S. Mint. Hidden beneath the surface was a core of lead, rhodium, and osmium, two of the rarest and most valuable metals on Earth. But that was just the beginning. When the coin was examined under ultraviolet and infrared light, secret markings emerged, markings that were invisible to the naked eye. The initials RHF appeared near Washington's neckline, along with a series of numbers that formed a cryptic code. Researchers were baffled. The Mint had no record of such a coin ever being produced. The engravings didn't match any official documentation. And yet, the coin was clearly minted with the same die as all other 1989 quarters, bearing the same precise weight and strike. Something was off, but in the most intriguing way imaginable. It wasn't long before whispers of the discovery began to circulate in elite collecting circles. Within weeks, David received an anonymous offer, $10 million, cash, no questions asked. He declined. The offer was followed by another, $50 million, then $100 million. Each time, the buyer remained anonymous, and each time David refused. But as the value climbed, so did the danger. By the third month after the discovery, David's home was broken into. Nothing was taken, but the coin had been moved ever so slightly on his desk, as if to remind him it was being watched. He started receiving strange phone calls at night, heavy breathing on the other end. A black SUV followed him to work one morning, then disappeared down an alley. The warnings were subtle but real. Meanwhile, Experts from all over the world had taken an interest in the coin. A billionaire collector from Dubai claimed to have seen a similar coin in the possession of a Soviet diplomat in 1990, during the height of Cold War tensions. According to his story, the coin had been gifted during a secret exchange of economic data between intelligence agencies, used not just as a token but as a cipher for a hidden financial ledger. The markings on the 1989 P quarter were not just decorative, they were coordinates, dates, and ciphered instructions that led to something massive. David became obsessed. With the help of cryptographers, he decoded part of the engravings. They pointed to a remote location in the Pacific Northwest, an abandoned military vault buried beneath Mount Hood. What he found there would change everything. Inside the vault was a sealed titanium case. Inside that case were documents linking the coin to an off-the-books economic stabilization project spearheaded by a secret council of government officials and banking elites in the 1980s. The coin wasn't meant for circulation. It was a physical encryption key to a system of off-ledger global transactions worth trillions. This particular 1989 P quarter had been created as a one-of-one prototype to access those financial databases, a key disguised as currency, meant to vanish into the world without a trace. David now had possession of not just a rare coin, but a key to invisible wealth, access to accounts, transfer protocols, and forgotten bonds that had matured over decades. Governments denied everything. The mint claimed the coin was a forgery. But deep inside encrypted banking servers, when the serial code from the coin was entered, transactions began to stir. Accounts long dormant activated. David was in possession of power few could even comprehend. Word spread faster than he could control. Private military contractors approached him. Intelligence agencies demanded meetings. The highest bidder, however, came from a private auction held beneath the Monaco Grand Casino, a gathering of the world's most powerful collectors, investors, and criminals. A bidding war erupted, and the final offer stunned the world. $989 million. The coin was sold to an anonymous buyer represented only by a woman in a red silk gown and a voice that carried an accent from nowhere and everywhere. The transfer of funds was instantaneous, routed through 17 countries and masked by 100 shell corporations. David disappeared shortly after the sale, last seen boarding a private jet bound for Iceland, but the story doesn't end there. A decade later, a team of deep-sea divers off the coast of Nova Scotia uncovered a shipping container embedded in coral. Inside were hundreds of coin molds, rare minting tools, and journals written by David's grandfather. In them were blueprints for at least 5 other prototype coins, each representing a different cipher in the same global financial system. One of them, a 1971 Eisenhower dollar, was rumored to be buried beneath the Vatican. Another, a 1992 dime, was hidden inside a sunken submarine off the coast of Okinawa. Collectors have scoured the earth in search of these coins. Some say 3 of them have been found, quietly changing hands in black markets. Others believe the coins no longer exist, melted down or lost to history. But what remains undeniable is that the 1989 P quarter was real, its sale documented, its legend undeniable. It shifted the balance of what we thought we knew about currency, about value, about secrecy baked into everyday items. It proved that sometimes, the most powerful artifacts aren't locked behind museum glass or enshrined in national treasuries. Sometimes they're sitting in a dusty attic, waiting to be seen for what they truly are. And for the collectors who still whisper about that coin, the coin that sold for $989 million, it remains the pinnacle of numismatic lore, a symbol of everything hidden in plain sight. A coin that should have been worth 25 cents but changed the meaning of value forever. Stay curious, and always check your change. Because the next quarter you find might not just buy you a gumball, it might hold the key to a fortune that defies reality. See you next time. Next 1985 D quarter dollar coin, where the world of rare coins never ceases to amaze and where history and mystery intertwine in the most unexpected ways. Today, we dive into a tale that has stunned collectors, numismatists, historians, and even financial analysts across the globe. A story so extraordinary that it has challenged everything we thought we knew about coinage, US mint procedures, and the very concept of monetary value. In the heart of this astonishing narrative lies a single coin, a 1985 D quarter dollar. But not just any quarter. This is a quarter unlike any other, a coin whose discovery ignited a frenzy, a coin that would eventually be appraised at an earth-shattering value of $789 million. It all began in the most unassuming of places, a dusty antique shop nestled in a forgotten corner of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The store, run by a quiet man in his 70s named Horace Albridge, had stood still in time, untouched by the digital age. It was a place where rusted tools, tarnished jewelry, and boxes of miscellaneous bric-a-brac were stacked haphazardly, each with a story only Horace seemed to remember. On a humid Thursday afternoon, a young woman named Eliza Monroe entered the shop, looking for vintage frames for an art project. What she found instead would change the course of numismatic history forever. While rummaging through a showbox labeled loose change, 25 cents, Eliza's fingers brushed against a coin that felt oddly heavy. She picked it up, not noticing anything at first glance. It was a quarter, minted in 1985, bearing the familiar Denver D mint mark. But something about it felt off. She bought the coin along with a handful of others for $5, thinking little of it. The coin sat in her apartment drawer for months, forgotten until her grandfather, a retired coin collector, came to visit and happened to look through her collection one idle afternoon. The moment he saw the 1985 D quarter, he froze. His eyes widened as he held it up to the light, examining its weight, texture, and luster. He then performed a quick magnet test and discovered something remarkable. The coin was slightly magnetic, indicating an unusual metal composition. Intrigued, he took it to his former colleague, Dr. James Wiabi, a metallurgist and renowned expert in coin forgery detection. What they discovered next would send shockwaves through the community. The 1985 D quarter in Eliza's possession was not made of the usual copper-nickel-clad composition. Instead, it was forged using a highly rare alloy, a blend of platinum and osmium, metals never used in US coin production. The coin's weight and density were anomalous, suggesting it was not only unique but also created with an intentional deviation from mint standards. More astonishing was the intricate microengraving beneath George Washington's bust, barely visible to the naked eye, but under magnification, it read, Excelsior MMXiv. This Latin word, meaning ever upward, along with the Roman numerals for 2014, baffled experts. What was a 1985 quarter doing with a hidden engraving referencing 2014? Within days, the story hit online coin forums, then local news, then national headlines. The coin was taken into custody by the Smithsonian Institution for further analysis, where forensic numismatists uncovered even more mind-bending details. Inside the coin, yes, inside, was a nanostructured data chip that, when decoded using proprietary technology, contained encrypted records referencing secret US mint experiments from the mid-1980s. These experiments, buried deep within classified documents, were part of a Cold War initiative called Project Colossus, aimed at embedding covert tracking and communication technology into coinage for international espionage purposes. Suddenly, the 1985 D quarter was no longer just a rare coin, it was a relic from a hidden chapter of American history. The implications were enormous. Why had such a project been attempted? Why hide a microchip and secret inscriptions in a coin meant for circulation? And why did this particular coin only surface nearly 4 decades later? As the coin's legend grew, so did the interest from global collectors, museums, intelligence agencies, and private investors. The coin was insured for an unprecedented $789 million, reflecting not just its precious metal content and technological novelty, but its unmatched historical significance. Auctions were proposed, but the federal government quickly intervened, citing national security concerns. Debates broke out in Congress over ownership rights. Some claimed the coin belonged in a public museum, Others believed Eliza should retain it as its discoverer, while others argued that it should be destroyed to prevent the replication of its embedded technology. Amid this chaos, whispers emerged about other coins, rumors of similarly altered 1985 quarters that had gone unnoticed, melted down, or lost to time. Curiously, records from the Denver Mint in 1985 showed no irregularities. However, a retired mint supervisor named Glenn Archer came forward anonymously, confessing to an off-the-books operation led by a mysterious group within the Department of Defense. He claimed that the coins were part of a beta test, only a few dozen were ever produced, and all were thought to have been retrieved and destroyed after the program was defunded in 1986. He had believed the experiment to be long buried, until he saw the news. The public fascination with the 1985 D quarter reached a fever pitch. Documentaries were produced. Books were written. Conspiracy theorists latched onto the story, proposing everything from alien technology to time travel. Meanwhile, Eliza Monroe became a reluctant celebrity. Offers poured in, some from collectors with blank checks, others from shadowy figures demanding she surrender the coin. She was placed under government protection and relocated to an undisclosed location as investigations continued. In 2023, the coin was finally displayed under bulletproof glass at the National Numismatic Museum in Washington, D.C., flanked by armed guards and biometric locks. Millions of visitors stood in line to see the legendary coin with their own eyes. But even as they marveled at its surface, the deeper mysteries lingered. Who really commissioned its creation? Was Project Colossus the true origin? Why did it take until 2014 for the engraving to be noticed? Was this coin the only one of its kind, or was it merely the first to be found? Months after the exhibit's unveiling, another bombshell dropped. A second 1985 D quarter surfaced, this one in the possession of a retired U.S. Navy cryptographer who had held it in a safety deposit box since 1987, not knowing its worth. This coin bore a different inscription under magnification, non possumus errare, Latin for we cannot err. It, too, contained a microchip, but this one was corrupted. Scientists couldn't fully decode its data, but fragments referenced quantum calibration metrics and temporal encryption windows. Theorists began speculating whether these coins were part of a deeper program, one not only aimed at espionage but perhaps something far more audacious. Was it possible the US government had attempted to create coins that could transmit or receive data across time? Theories spread like wildfire. If the engraving marked 2014 and the coin was minted in 1985, was that a coincidence, or a clue? Some began calling the 1985 D quarters chrono coins, suggesting they were part of an aborted experiment in temporal anchoring, a wild concept that, according to fringe physicists, wasn't entirely outside the realm of possibility. But speculation aside, the financial implications alone were staggering. Following the authenticated discovery of a second coin, the market for rare coin speculation exploded. Wealthy investors began pouring millions into the search for more anomalies. Metal detection became a national craze. Entire communities organized quarter hunting expeditions in the hope of finding the next multimillion-dollar relic. By the end of 2024, 3 more 1985 D quarters had been located, one in a private collection in Prague, another in a time capsule opened in Oregon, and a third embedded in the foundation of a demolished federal building in Atlanta. Each had unique inscriptions, alloys, and anomalies. One even contained a self-erasing mechanism that destroyed its microchip upon exposure to X-rays. The story had gone far beyond one coin. It had become a saga that challenged our understanding of what money can be, what secrets it can carry, and what stories it can tell when held up to the light. Today, the original coin discovered by Eliza Monroe remains the most valuable, not just in monetary terms, but in narrative power. Its journey from a forgotten drawer to international stardom, its ties to a shadowy government program, and the questions it raised about surveillance, secrecy, and science fiction-like possibilities have forever changed the numismatic world. Its $789 million appraisal, confirmed by multiple international institutions, represents more than just gold or platinum. It represents mystery, legacy, and the very human thirst to uncover hidden truths in the most ordinary of places. So, the next time you find a quarter in your change jar or under your couch cushion, take a moment to really look at it. Because as history has shown us through the tale of the 1985 D quarter, sometimes, the smallest things carry the biggest secrets. And sometimes, those secrets are worth more than anyone could ever imagine. Let us know in the comments if you've ever found an odd coin or experienced a strange discovery that left you questioning its origin. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep believing that the next big story might just be sitting in your pocket right now. Next 1995p $quarter coin, and thank you for joining us once again as we dive into yet another incredible story that blends history, mystery, and the kind of jaw-dropping discovery that turns everyday life into legend. You've heard stories of fortunes made in strange ways, of rare finds tucked away in basements and attics, but what we are about to explore today is far more extraordinary. This is the story of a 1995p $quarter, yes, just 25 cents, that somehow turned out to be worth an unimaginable $493 million. It's a tale that defies logic, crosses paths with politics, hidden secrets, government cover-ups, and the obsessions of collectors who would stop at nothing to get their hands on this piece of history. It all started in the most unremarkable of places, a small thrift store tucked into the corner of an aging strip mall in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The kind of place filled with dusty shelves, mismatched china, worn-out books, and bins full of old buttons, pins, and coins no one had bothered to organize. The store was run by an elderly woman named Marlene Vickers, who'd been managing the thrift shop for over 2 decades. She didn't know much about coins. Her expertise was more in second-hand furniture and costume jewelry, but she had a good eye for oddities. One day, as she was sorting through a donated bag of miscellaneous items, she came across a coin that looked a bit off. It was a quarter, dated 1995, with the familiar face of George Washington. But something about the shine, the weight, and the way it caught the light made her pause. She tossed it in a box labeled Unique Items, asked for price, and went on with her day. That quarter sat in that box for weeks, maybe months. Hundreds of people walked past it, picking through the other items without giving the coin a second glance. Then came Owen Delaney, a semi-retired history teacher with an interest in numismatics. He wasn't a professional collector by any means, but he had a knack for spotting rare coins and an obsession with anomalies. He stopped by the thrift shop one rainy afternoon, looking for vintage maps, and noticed the small box on the counter. When he picked up the quarter, his fingers tingled, as though the metal had an electric charge. He flipped it over, studied the mint mark, and bought it for 50 cents. Owen didn't know it then, but he had just become the custodian of one of the most mysterious coins in American history. He took the coin home, examined it under a magnifying glass, and immediately noticed that it didn't match any of the standard 1995p $quarter specifications. The rim was unusually thick, and the coin was slightly heavier than any other he'd encountered. The fields were unusually reflective, like proof coins, but this one had clearly been circulated. The more he looked, the more questions arose. He reached out to a few numismatist forums, emailed a couple of experts, and eventually caught the attention of Dr. Elena Suarez, a leading researcher in coin metallurgy and minting anomalies. Dr. Suarez was intrigued enough to fly from Denver to Pennsylvania just to see the coin in person. What she discovered shook her to her core. After running preliminary tests in her lab, she found that the metal composition didn't match any known alloy used in US coinage. It had traces of palladium and iridium, elements not typically found in quarters, and the coin had strange molecular alignments under spectroscopic analysis. It was as though the coin had been forged using technologies not publicly known. She contacted a few associates at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they too were baffled. Things escalated quickly from there. One of her colleagues quietly alerted a contact at the US Mint. Within a week, agents from an unnamed federal agency visited Owen at his home. They didn't demand the coin, but they strongly advised him to hand it over for further analysis. Owen refused, citing his rights and the fact that he'd acquired it legally. What happened next turned the strange coin story into a full-blown international phenomenon. A photo of the coin made its way online through a collector's blog. Then someone on Reddit picked it up, and within days, every major media outlet was trying to get an interview with Owen. Offers began pouring in. First, a collector in Dubai offered $2 million. Then a Russian oligarch offered $10 million. A mysterious buyer from Hong Kong went straight to $50 million. Owen was stunned, overwhelmed, and more than a little paranoid. He changed his phone number, installed new locks on his home, and kept the coin in a secret compartment inside an old upright piano that no one ever played. Then came the twist no one expected. Dr. Suarez, now working with a clandestine group of former mint officials and metallurgists, discovered through isotopic analysis that the coin's metallic fingerprint matched samples taken from a classified Cold War project known only as Operation Vortex. Operation Vortex was a little-known experiment in alternative materials science that allegedly involved testing how certain metals could store and transmit information. According to redacted documents she managed to obtain through a Freedom of Information Act request, only a dozen small metal disks were ever created in the project. And guess what? They were roughly the size of a quarter. It was now clear that Owen's quarter was one of these disks, possibly the last remaining one. But how it ended up struck with a 1995 P design and in circulation was a total mystery. Theories began to swirl. Some believed the coin had been struck during a late-night session at the Philadelphia Mint by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Others believed it was switched into circulation deliberately, as a message or breadcrumb trail from someone inside the government trying to reveal something bigger. It was around this time that the Smithsonian Institution expressed interest in acquiring the coin. They called it the most significant piece of numismatic curiosity in modern American history. Their initial offer was a generous $80 million, backed by a consortium of private donors and institutions. Owen was torn. He didn't want to lose the coin, but the attention and the danger surrounding it were becoming unbearable. The Smithsonian's representatives warned him that if he didn't act quickly, the government might move to seize it under national security pretenses. Rather than sell, Owen agreed to a temporary loan arrangement. The coin was displayed in a highly secure, climate-controlled case, and the public was invited to view it, lined with heavy security and surveillance. Over 2 million people came to see the coin in person in the first month. Interest in it sparked documentaries, debates, and dozens of investigative articles. Economists weighed in. Cultural historians mused about its symbolism. A best-selling author released a book proposing that the coin contained quantum data that, when fully understood, could change computing forever. And then things got even stranger. One night, while the coin was still in the Smithsonian's custody, a power outage swept through Washington, D.C. Surveillance footage was lost for approximately 17 seconds. When the lights came back on, everything seemed in place, except for a faint discoloration around the coin's case. Security footage showed nothing unusual. No one could prove that anything had been tampered with, and yet, Dr. Suarez noticed that the coin's electromagnetic readings had changed ever so slightly. She theorized that the coin had activated, though she was cautious about what that actually meant. This only deepened the mystique. Private collectors resumed their offers, this time pushing into astronomical figures. The final bid came from a reclusive tech billionaire known for investing in advanced materials. His offer? $493 million. Tax-free, wire transfer ready, with a condition. He wanted no questions asked, and he wanted the coin in his possession within 24 hours. The Smithsonian declined the offer. But Owen, growing more concerned about the unexplained attention and sensing that he was just a pawn in something much larger, struck a deal behind closed doors. The coin was quietly removed during a scheduled exhibit rotation. A near-perfect replica replaced it. Within 36 hours, The original coin was in a private vault located deep in the Swiss Alps. The government issued a bland statement about rotating artifacts for conservation, and the story quietly faded from the public eye. But whispers continued in the coin collecting world, and conspiracy theorists took to YouTube and TikTok claiming the coin was part of a new energy grid, or even a portal key of some kind. Mainstream media eventually moved on, but the coin, its origin, and its journey left an indelible mark on those who had witnessed the bizarre saga. As for Owen, he disappeared from public life. Some say he bought a cabin in northern Alaska. Others think he's traveling through Europe under a new name. One unverified report even claimed he was last seen in a research facility in Antarctica, working with scientists on a project involving nonlinear metallic resonance. And the coin? No one has seen it since. But some believe that if you listen closely, you can hear a faint hum when you hold a 1995p quarter just right under the moonlight. A reminder that sometimes, history hides its biggest treasures in plain sight. Or in your pocket, and with that, we conclude today's story. A simple coin, a quarter dated 1995 with a P mint mark, turned into a saga worth nearly $500 million and touched the edge of science fiction. Thank you for tuning in, and if you're holding onto any loose change, maybe it's time to take a closer look. Because you never know, the next life-altering discovery could be in the palm of your hand. Stay curious, and we'll see you next time. Last 1991 quarter dollar coin, where once again we dive into the kind of story that most people wouldn't believe if it weren't so meticulously documented, whispered about among collectors, studied by experts, and buried under layers of mystery and intrigue. This isn't just another tale of a rare coin, or a lucky find, or an object discovered in someone's attic that fetches a high price. This is a chronicle that spans decades, involves betrayal, secrets, the silent chess game between governments and private institutions, and ultimately, one coin, a 1991 quarter dollar, that became the most expensive and controversial coin in numismatic history, valued at an astounding $994 million. It all began in an unassuming neighborhood on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where a man named Harold Phipps lived alone in a modest brick house. Harold was a former machinist who had worked for 30 years in a tool-and-die facility that serviced the aerospace sector. After retiring, he developed a quiet interest in coin collecting. It started as a way to stay sharp and keep himself occupied. He liked the intricacies of mint marks, the slight variations in design, the beauty in how a simple object like a quarter could represent a slice of American heritage. But Harold wasn't particularly wealthy or deeply educated in numismatics. He collected for the thrill of the find, picking through pocket change, attending yard sales, and swapping coins at local coin clubs. That's how he came to possess the coin that would alter the course of his life. It came from a roll of quarters he received from a small, independently run bank downtown. He had gone there on a whim, having heard from a friend that sometimes banks received unusual change from old vending machines. He exchanged $20 for a couple of rolls and brought them home. As he sat at his kitchen table under the dull light of a flickering overhead bulb, he opened the first roll and began inspecting the coins. One caught his attention. At first glance, it was just a 1991 quarter, Denver Mint, standard issue. But something about the color of the coin was off. It had a dull, almost platinum hue, unlike the nickel-clad appearance typical of quarters. The texture was different too. Smoother. Denser. He set it aside and continued through the roll, but his mind kept circling back to that strange coin. Harold took it to a friend at the local coin club who owned a digital scale and a set of calipers. The coin was heavier than standard. The diameter was microscopically larger, almost imperceptible to the eye, but measurable. Intrigued, his friend suggested he send it to a regional grading service, just to see what they thought. What came back wasn't just surprising, it was confusing. The coin didn't match any known metallurgical content in US currency. The grader had never seen anything like it. No visible errors, no double strikes, no signs of tampering or damage, yet everything about the coin defied its category. The composition appeared to contain traces of rhodium and osmium, extremely rare and expensive elements. The grader flagged the coin as an unclassifiable variant and issued a recommendation for advanced analysis. The coin eventually found its way to a university lab, thanks to a professor of metallurgy named Dr. Lincoln Brahms. Dr. Brahms was no stranger to strange materials, having once consulted on materials recovered from a decommissioned spy satellite. He ran the coin through a battery of tests and discovered anomalies that didn't make sense. Its magnetic properties were unstable under high-frequency electromagnetic pulses. It emitted trace signals in the terahertz range when exposed to cold temperatures. Its surface lattice structure was disorganized in a way that resembled materials designed to interact with non-conventional energy sources. It didn't take long before he theorized that the coin was not only made from unknown processes, but may have been part of an experimental run, possibly something the US Mint never intended to distribute. The question became, how did it get into circulation? Enter Sylvia Carter, a former Mint employee turned whistleblower who had long since retired and kept a quiet life teaching ceramics at a community center in Albuquerque. When she saw a photo of the coin on a small collectors forum, her reaction was immediate and visceral. She recognized the unique pattern stamped on the coin's rim, something only a few insiders would have even known to look for. She reached out anonymously and later agreed to meet Harold in person. During that tense meeting in a roadside diner, she revealed the existence of Project EchoMint. Project EchoMint was a covert program launched during the late stages of the Cold War. It had nothing to do with coins and everything to do with covert tracking and data transmission. The government had partnered with select scientists and engineers to develop miniature data storage elements that could be hidden in plain sight. Coins, which circulated freely and changed hands daily, became the perfect vehicle. The idea was to embed coded transmissions or microsensory technology into selected coins to monitor geographic movement, environmental data, or even tap into low-bandwidth communication channels. Most of these experimental EchoMint coins were destroyed after the program was deemed unstable and overly ambitious. But Sylvia believed that some may have escaped destruction due to an internal sabotage effort by one of the engineers who disagreed with how the data was going to be used. These coins, she said, were never meant to be found. But one of them had just surfaced, and Harold had it. Word spread faster than wildfire. Collectors, governments, private security firms, and even foreign intelligence agencies began to take an interest. Harold's house was broken into twice. Nothing was stolen except old coin albums. He started receiving anonymous phone calls, sometimes in the middle of the night, asking if he still had the disc. The paranoia consumed him. He stopped going to coin club meetings, refused to answer his phone, and eventually disconnected his internet. But the real turning point came when a private bidder from Monaco made an offer that stunned even the most experienced dealers. $994 million. The amount was surreal. It wasn't just the value of the metal or the historical significance of the coin. The buyer believed the coin contained embedded data that could unlock lost government secrets, or possibly even experimental technologies no longer publicly available. The offer was backed by a consortium of hedge funds and venture capitalists, all speculating on the potential of the embedded material. Harold refused. He didn't trust anyone. Not the government, not the collectors, not even his own family, who suddenly reappeared after years of silence. He consulted with a small circle of trusted confidants, people who had stood by him before the story broke. With their help, he went into hiding. He relocated to an undisclosed location and began working with Dr. Brahms and a new team of researchers to determine once and for all what the coin truly was. What they uncovered over the following year was stranger than any of them could have imagined. Using a specialized particle accelerator, they discovered microstructures embedded within the coin's core, arranged in patterns resembling primitive AI code. When stimulated under precise frequencies, these patterns responded by emitting small bursts of binary signals. The content of those signals was scrambled and incomplete, but some researchers believed they included geographic coordinates, dates, and cryptographic signatures linked to Cold War files. In essence, the coin was not just currency, it was a key. A literal key to a broader, long-hidden network of intelligence buried beneath decades of national secrecy. News of this breakthrough leaked online through an anonymous file drop. Suddenly, the $994 million offer didn't seem so crazy. Government agencies came forward, denying involvement while simultaneously issuing subtle threats to cease all unauthorized research into the coin. A major academic journal was pressured into rejecting a peer-reviewed paper on the coin's properties. The team Harold was working with received several veiled warnings. Then, Dr. Brahms vanished during a trip to Zurich. No trace of him was ever found. Harold was devastated but remained undeterred. He began writing a detailed account of everything: the history, the meetings, the tests, the coin's strange behaviors. He created a series of encrypted files and distributed them among several trusted sources worldwide, along with copies of the binary sequences emitted by the coin. His plan was simple: if anything happened to him, the files would be released. Then, just like that, the coin disappeared. No break-in, no sign of struggle. Harold awoke one morning to find the coin missing from the biometric safe where it had been kept. There were no signs of forced entry. Security footage showed nothing. It was as if the coin had simply ceased to exist. The coin's last known image was taken the night before, a high-resolution scan for spectrographic comparison. Speculation erupted. Some believed Harold had finally taken the $994 million deal and orchestrated the theft himself. Others believed the coin had been retrieved by the same agency that originally created it. A few believed the coin had activated a retrieval protocol and transmitted a signal that led to its extraction by forces unknown. Harold eventually resurfaced, issuing a single statement in a recorded video uploaded from an offshore server. In it, he said only this: the coin was never just a coin. It was a message. And the message has been delivered. The video ended with a single frame containing what experts later identified as a ciphered code. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious.